You don't need another strategy. Here's what you actually need to figure out why you can't implement the things that you already know. I'm Dr. Brooklyn Storm, former psychologist, now business coach, and I help women just like us to build profitable private practices, usually in under 12 months. Being neurodivergent means I see the patterns that other coaches miss, but it also means I'm a truth teller, so I'm not interested in giving you any business advice that sounds good or might be trending, but doesn't actually work for us. Welcome to the Practice Momentum podcast, where we're going to get your private practice sorted out. Thanks so much for being here, and let's get on with the next episode. Okay, welcome back to the podcast. This episode is especially for counsellors and psychotherapists to support you in navigating the rolling out of the regulation of the industry. This is going to be especially helpful if you have a diploma qualification and you have questions and you're not sure what's going on and you just need sort of a summary, if you like. So, yeah. In November 2025, which wasn't really that long ago, right? 4 months, 16 weeks or so, the national standards were or were not finalised. It's very important to understand this. There are some organisations, peak bodies, that are saying they were finalised. Yet if you go and look at the Department of Health and Aged Care website, they're still up there as a draft and don't say that they've been finalised. There's no indication that they've been finalised yet. Some peak bodies seem to be kind of running with it. So there's a lot of confusion around that. There's also a lot of confusion around the national standards, whether you want to see them as finalised or draft, because they're very, very ambiguous. There are a lot of questions that were raised that, haven't been answered. And we're going to cover some of those things today because they're relevant to you having your say in the model of regulation that you feel would work best for you and for peers and colleagues in our industry. I think what's happening is, and Philip mentioned this yesterday. So yesterday I hosted a webinar for the Vocational Mental Health Professionals Association of Australia, where I interviewed Philip Armstrong, the CEO. We had Martin there as well. So he is a King's Counsel with the High Court of Australia, and we had the chairperson there, the executive committee, and we had a few people on that were able to come along live and participate, which is really great. But anyway, we just tried to unpack everything. And I've just forgotten what I was going to say, but that's okay. I'll come back to it. The thing is that there's been things within the national standards at the moment that are very, very ambiguous. Things about registration, things about licensing, things about rolling it out, things about grandfathering or not, things about why can't people who have a diploma continue to supervise. Too many questions, right? And nothing has been finalised. And now what's happened is, instead of providing the detail that we need and creating policy around that, what's ended up happening is we've just all moved on to the next step, which is, now let's enforce everything. I don't understand how you can enforce stuff when you don't even know what it is you're trying to enforce. And if you want to hear more about what's ambiguous and what's missing and what we still need answers for in order to make an informed decision about regulation, please go back and listen to previous episodes I've done for you on the national standards. So this is the next step, if you like. And the first step was putting something together for standards. The standards are not legislated. The standards are optional. You don't have to abide by them. They apply if you are a member of a peak body that does use them. So like ACA, PACFA, but there are other organisations, membership bodies that you can definitely be a part of, still work as a counsellor and still go about your business as usual without being restricted or, limited in what you do, your practice, supervision that you provide, all those kinds of things. So that's very important to understand, because I don't think enough people know that. I think they all just think they're all, it's all doom and gloom, and everything is, real, and it is, but only if you're a member of organisations that ascribe to it. So that's important for you to know. And anyway, stage 2 is looking at how do we regulate it. So yeah, I guess as Philip was saying yesterday, you're essentially being asked to comment on something that A, hasn't been finalised, and B, that hasn't clearly been defined. We're skipping ahead too quickly. There is, like, for example, in the national standards, it says that a level 1 practitioner, i.e. somebody who's got a diploma, isn't able to supervise. And that is a problem, because we've got lots of women. So as you know, nearly all counsellors are women aged 40 plus, and lots of them are supervisors and have been supervising for years, right? And now they're suddenly going to be told, nope, you can't do that anymore. And there'll be a regulation which will, include maybe a consequence for them doing something that they shouldn't be doing. It's a problem. And the other reason that it's a problem is because, like everything else in the national standards, there isn't any clinical evidence at all to show that a supervisor that holds a diploma plus a qualification in supervising other professionals does a bad job, gets worse outcomes, is less safe, is not as skilled, is not as good as somebody who has a tertiary degree. There's no evidence for that anywhere. And yet here we are being asked to just ignore that. Don't worry about that. Just tell us how you want us to enforce things. Well, how can you enforce things that you don't agree with, that there's no evidence for, in an industry that's trying to get professionally acknowledged for being evidence-based? I mean, it's cuckoo. Anywho, there's that. The other things that I've got in my notes is, who's going to be getting the money for licensing? So licensing in psychology, call it registration, right? So, I want to know who's going to get that money. What are they going to do with that money? Where's it all going to go, Under what authority is the regulations going to be activated, managed, monitored, reinforced, all those kinds of things? And, where are the guardrails? Where's the oversight? And you'll understand what I'm talking about more in a moment, because I have very strong concerns about this. For example, I don't know if you've seen it or not, and you could be forgiven if you haven't, the consultation is an online survey. I'll put the link in the show notes for you. And there is a document, a paper to go along with it, right? And it's recommended that you familiarise yourself with that first. So this document took me probably about 2 hours to go through, because, of course you could read it in half an hour or something, but I wanted to make sure I was understanding everything. And it's just so, they didn't put any research into it. They've just sort of said, oh, look, in putting this paper together, it says this in the actual paper. It says, oh yeah, we just put it together quickly based on, desktop review to publicly available information. You're talking about legislating something potentially, and you're just going to do a quick search on Google. That's a big concern for me. But then there were other things that were included in this document that were very, very interesting. So they've identified 3 potential options for regulating the profession, regulating the industry. And one of them is voluntary. So it's just like self-regulation, what we've got now. Okay. So I guess my concern about that is under the national standards, there's got to be registration, right? Or licensing. You got to be registered or licensed with someone. So that would mean that if we just don't change anything and we don't have any government involvement, then it's going to be peak bodies that determine the requirements for registration and licensing. Now, for me, that raises a few issues because none of the 3 peak bodies, like mine included, I'm saying Vocational Mental Health Professionals Association of Australia. And by the way, just in case anybody's going to think stuff, this is entirely my opinion. I'm not representing the board or anything like that here. This is just me and my 2 cents. What was I going to say? All the 3 peak bodies have different recognition foundations, right? It's like PACFA won't recognise you as a psychotherapist or a counsellor unless you have completed a higher degree, right? ACA, it's a little bit mixed. They say they'll recognise you with a diploma. They're not doing a fantastic job, I don't think, of advocating for you if you've got a diploma, because I see so much easily accessible information online about PACFA's involvement with everything. And as I've said to you before, I disagree with how PACFA, like what they believe, right? But I cannot take it away from them that they are brilliant with lobbying. They have done, like, if you're a PACFA member, you would have to be very pleased because their leadership group have done such an amazing job of really getting so involved with key stakeholders across the board, building important, meaningful relationships. And as a result of that, they've achieved their goal of being able to have a very powerful influence over not only the national standards, but now what the regulation looks like. So I think if you're a PACFA member, you're probably feeling very happy, and I totally get that. My issue, I guess, is I'm worried for the people who have a diploma because they're under the impression that they've been getting a lot of advocacy from the ACA, but when you have a look, like, it pales in comparison to the amount of lobbying that PACFA have been doing. As I said, I don't agree with everything that PACFA are doing, but credit to them. They've done an amazing job, and this is why we're seeing all this stuff happening in part, right? So they can't agree on what qualifies somebody to call themselves a counsellor. So what does that mean for counsellors then? Does that mean you apply for registration with one, they knock you back, so you go and get registration for another and maybe they accept you? Like, if the whole point of this is to, make the public feel safe and it's meant to raise up the profile of the profession, it doesn't make any sense that, there are different requirements to call yourself one. But the other thing too that bothers me about it is I think that there could be like conflict of interest. Don't you? I mean, if the peak body that you're with is now also saying, oh yeah, by the way, we are your peak body, but we're also your registration body and you must also pay us the registration money. Like, don't you think that's going to be a bit of a conflict of interest? Because they're two very separate roles, right? One is being a peak body in a membership organisation over here, but the other one is essentially being a registration body, right? I think that the peak bodies should not be able to also provide registrations. But there's no mention of oversight. And if we were to stay with voluntary, which would be my preference, but if we stay with voluntary and it is determined that the peak bodies, and I don't know, I mean, there's nothing to say that you have to be a peak body. I mean, there might be one of these other smaller sort of organisations that decide they also want to provide registrations. I could go and start up a peak body. You could go and start up a peak body, and you could start collecting registration fees from people, and you might decide that you're going to lower the bar, maybe, or lower the cost of registration. Guess what? You're going to get a whole lot of members, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So I think that if that's going to happen, we need oversight. But that's going to raise its own issues as well, because who's going to oversee the registration bodies? Is it going to be a panel? Is it going to be a tribunal? Does it need to be legislated? What's the infrastructure required around that, etc., etc., etc.? So it becomes like quite a big thing, right? So anyway, and there's no mention of any guardrails around conflict of interest and dual relationships and stuff like that. So yeah, it kind of worries me a little bit. And it doesn't matter if you have a tertiary qualification or not. I think that's relevant to everybody, right? The other thing too is that the paper, when you read it, I went into the paper thinking, oh, okay, this is information that I need in order to respond to the survey. And I just thought that it was going to be objective. It never occurred to me, I know it's my naivety, but it never occurred to me that the paper was going to be biased. Have a read for yourself, even if it's just skimming it. Heads up, as I said before, it's 40 pages long, but you can download it as a PDF. Just have a quick skim and see what you feel. But to me, the three options were business as usual and the peak bodies, manage registrations. The second option for regulation is contract-based, which simply means it's kind of like what's in place now, but it's if you're a counsellor or a psychotherapist and you want to do work that's funded by the government, like maybe, for example, and this is just like hypothetical, by the way, this isn't in place yet or anything like that, I'm just giving you hypothetical, NDIS or work cover or TAC or something like that. The government might say, yep, go ahead and do this NDIS work over here, but you need to have registration, and we need your registration number and your registration details, right? So there could be that. So it would mean that if you weren't registered, you probably wouldn't be able to do that work. So that's the second option. I feel like we kind of are already seeing that in a way, though, through membership, not through registration. We see that with some, like even NDIS, you need to be with ACA or PACFA, right? Or some kind of similar association. So that's kind of already there. The third option is statutory. And statutory regulation is where the government manages everything, really. Instead of going and getting your registration from a peak body, you apply to the government. And it would probably, I imagine it would just make sense to slot it in with AHPRA, because AHPRA is the Health Professionals Regulation Association of Australia. So there's already infrastructure there. There's already, a lot of knowledge and awareness around what works, what doesn't, tribunals, processes, complaints handling, all of the things, right? Portals, dashboards, logins, like it's kind of already set up. So I think if I was the government and the decision was made that it was going to be statutory, I would just think, well, let's just use what we've already got and we will just slot them under. I would probably just do that rather than go and set up something completely brand new, right? Can you imagine the money that's going to be required to do that? That doesn't feel viable to me. But this is just my educated guess. I really can't see them setting up something outside of APRA. And that's statutory, right? And that's like the first option. And then the second option is peak bodies doing it in conjunction with the government, which again, to me feels icky, and it raises a whole lot of concerns and issues, again, around oversight, conflict of interest, dual roles, dual relationships, like all of the things. No. Anywho, I expected that the paper that it's recommended you read before you respond to the survey was going to just provide an overview and detailed information on all of the options, the background, the implications, etc., etc. However, as I started to read it, I could see very clearly. I mean, what's the saying? A blind man on a galloping horse could see this very clearly. They're pushing for statutory. I could be wrong, just my opinion. This is what it feels like. And I was quite surprised when I started to realize, oh, hang on, this is like, it's really making a case to have regulation be monitored, I guess, by the government. So I just thought that was very interesting. To my reading, it felt very, very biased, and that made me nervous. And then you go and you open up the survey, and the survey is just weird and bizarre. Like, for example, it collects data. The first bunch of questions that you answer are obviously going to be like, all of this, there's going to be data run on it, right? Yes. They want to know, I guess, if you're male or female, or how old you are, or how not old you are, where you're from, and your background, and who you're with and who you're not, and all of that demographic stuff, right? So yeah, you fill out all of that. And interestingly, it also says, like, yeah, in what capacity are you filling this out, or something along those lines. And it's like, are you a general member of the public? Are you somebody who's got a qualification that's nationally recognised? Are you a health professional that has a qualification that's not nationally recognised? Are you a government employee? Are you a labourer? It's like all of this. Now, I understand they've done that because they've made it open for everybody to have their voice heard and to have their say. I get that. But there are two issues that come with that. And the first one is a requirement of understanding, a working knowledge of what the national standards are. Now, how is a school mum who's never heard of national standards going to be able to give her 5 cents about what regulation should look like in our industry? How's the electrician down the road going to be able to do that? Like, without no prior knowledge of what it is we're actually all voting on here. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And Philip also raised it yesterday, and he was saying, he gave an example, something along the lines of, I don't know, would you feel comfortable going and having a say on something to do with the GPs if you didn't understand what any of it was about? Probably not. And then the second issue was that all those responses get given the equal weighting, but it only affects counsellors and psychotherapists. So what this means is, like, there's potential for stacking in the responses, meaning, like, I don't know, if you had a lot of friends who weren't in the industry, maybe you had a lot of friends at basketball or you had a lot of friends, I don't know, from the footy group you're in online and there's like 30,000 members, you could ask them all to go and fill out this survey. And even though they know nothing about national standards or what we do, all of their votes get the same weight as ours. And I think that's a problem. Anyway, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I think the voices of the people it affects the most, the counsellors and the psychotherapists, should have, primary influence over what's going on here, as opposed to people who have no knowledge or very little. And even within our industry, there's still so much confusion about the national standards, and that comes back to them being so ambiguous. PACFA interprets them one way, ACA have interpreted them in their way, the association VMHPAA have interpreted them their way, and every man and his dog has an opinion on them because nobody really understands what they mean, which means there's kind of like everybody's in limbo about how to actually roll them out and implement them. But instead of addressing it, we've just like launched ahead and gone, okay, let's enforce it all now, but we don't know what we're enforcing. Anywho, the survey's assuming that you know the answers to the questions that they're going to ask before you get asked them, right? There are accreditation issues in there, as I mentioned, where nobody has a consistent process for accrediting practitioners, right? There's no one benchmark on what constitutes a qualification. I mean, at the association, it's if you've got a diploma, yes, you're qualified, go work. If you're with the ACA, they've got a foot in both camps. If you're with PACFA, they're like, no, it's only if you've got a uni degree. So, yeah, as I said before, problem. And there's no agreement on what a minimum requirement should look like. So why are we looking at enforcing things when we don't even know what it is we're enforcing, because that stuff hasn't been determined yet? There hasn't been any determination of pathways by ACA, at least, of people who already supervise, for example, might have a diploma. Like, where are the pathways for them? Where are the pathways for different levels in ACA to, take the bridge option before anything gets implemented and rolled out so that they meet any new requirements? Like, again, you're being asked to vote on something that you don't even know what it looks like. You're being asked to say, yes, by all means, I think it'd be so helpful to the public and to the profession and to get on Medicare if we have statutory regulation. I don't know what that will look like for me yet. I don't know what's been asked of me, but I know that this is going to be great. Well, what if it's not great for you? And what if it restricts your practice? What if you're under the impression this is going to help you in some way, shape or form, but actually it ends up restricting your practice and you've gone and said yes to something before you even realize what it meant for you and your business and your family and your clients and all of the things. And as Philip was saying on the webinar yesterday, like, of these three categories, if one of them goes through, if one of them gets approved, there's going to be thousands of counsellors and psychotherapists out of work, potentially. So why would you go and answer a survey saying you want something enforced when you don't know what it is you're enforcing, right? It's scary what you're being asked to do. What we're all being asked to do. The other thing too is, they said that, this is in the paper, the prelim paper that you need to read, or you absolutely should read before completing the survey. It says, yes, we got some information from RCAP. Well, the thing is that RCAP isn't actually representative of the counselling and psychotherapy profession as a whole. RCAP only represents ACA and PACFA. So, yeah, there's that. What about all the other bodies? What about all the other memberships, right? What about what they're called? Certified Practicing Counsellors Australia. You know? What about the Victorian Federation of Counsellors? Like, none of their stuff's included. What about, the 60,000 counsellors who aren't with ACA or PACFA or the association? Like, none of their stuff counts because they don't qualify under RCAP to have their voice heard, right? Problem. So you can see there's inherent issues with this paper already. Number one, it was like a 5-minute Google search, coupled with limited data that isn't representative of the counselling and psychotherapy profession as a whole. Big problem. One of the other issues there was, again, lack of evidence behind any of the things that are mentioned in the document. It's smelling a lot like the baseless national standards, which, as you know, just are so problematic because they were prepared and announced as being based on the latest clinical research. They don't have a reference list. They don't have a bibliography. There are no references. And when you go and do your own research on the rationale for women with a diploma not being as good at supervising as women who've got a university degree, there's no evidence for it. When you look at the other standards within the standards about, oh, well, we have to make the public safe because, counsellors aren't safe when they're not working to a standard and things like that. Again, there was no clinical evidence for that. There is no clinical evidence for any one of the things in the national standards. But they were marketed to our profession as being evidence-based. It was BS. They're not. And if people took 5 minutes to go and Google if you want, that seems to be what these leaders are doing, Googling stuff. If you go and Google some of those things on the national standard and ask where is the clinical evidence for this, it comes back every time that there isn't any. But they were sold to you as being evidence-based, and they're being sold to the government who, bureaucrats, politicians, they don't know mental health. They don't understand what it's like to do your job. They're trusting on the reports that they're getting from Allen and Clark, who manage the one for the national standards, and now it's for NU, who are managing this consultation here about regulations. So they're just receiving what they're being given. What they're being given is bias. Anyway, yeah. The third issue with this regulation consultation is there's a impact where, as I said, potentially thousands in the workforce could be out of work if the model goes through. And knowing what we know, that's going to be middle-aged women out of jobs. I don't know how PACFA and ACA are okay with that. Especially ACA. I don't understand. It is like there's developing, you could say it's already been in the pipelines, and I know it's not official or formal, but I feel it. And I think maybe, I don't want to speak for anybody out of line here, but I feel like maybe there are diploma qualified counsellors that feel it too, that there's becoming a us and them, but it's becoming like a division. My concern is we're going to end up with what's similar in psychology, and we've got a 2-tier system, and it's one counsellor or psychotherapist is considered better than another. That's my biggest concern with all of this. Anyway, yeah, I've already mentioned about, the inequity in terms of different bodies, recognising the definition. Like there's no agreed definition of what a counsellor is and what they need to do to be one. But again, you have to do all of these things according to the national standards that haven't been decided yet. And now you're being asked, in the absence of knowing what they are, to say how you want them to be reinforced. Like, it's bizarre. If there's going to be registration, then there would need to be a standardised curriculum, just like there is in any other qualification, right? You know, if you're going to be a doctor, you've got to go and do like the 4 years and the 2 years. And then if you want to be a frac, like a fellow, it's more time. You know, if you're going to be a psychologist, you're going to be doing 5+1 and then maybe even additional if you want to specialise further, all of that. And it doesn't matter which club you're with. You could be with the APS, you could be with the AAPI, doesn't matter. They're just membership clubs. You don't even have to be with one. Your registration's through APRA, but everybody's on the same page in the hoops you've got to jump through to call yourself one. At the moment, there is no standard curriculum. So again, how can we be saying, oh yeah, please create regulation for around something that we don't even know what it's going to look like yet? What if they decide that the regulation is that from 2030, you can only call yourself a counsellor or a psychologist if you've got a master's? Like, how would you even know that that's in the minds of peak bodies? You wouldn't. But they're telling you, oh yeah, go, push for statutory, all of this, because then we might get on Medicare. And you go, oh yeah, great, I want to be on Medicare. And you cast your vote. Next thing you know, you're out of a job because you've only got a diploma or a batch. That's what I'm saying. It's scary. Like, this wouldn't happen in any other profession. And it's really worrying because the whole reason this is happening is because the profession wants to be taken seriously. But we're a laughing stock. Other professions looking at us going, oh my gosh, like, can they not get their act together? Anywho, all right. The other thing too is that in the regulations proposal, you will see that they're arguing that one of the reasons for introducing it is so that the public can feel okay about working with a counsellor or psychologist, because they will know that psychotherapist, because they will know that the counsellor or psychotherapist is highly trained and highly qualified. Because PACFA say that at the moment they've been getting bucket loads of complaints from the public saying that people who weren't highly trained and who weren't highly qualified haven't been as good as people who were. Now, they haven't released any of that data. They've just kind of announced it. They've just kind of made the statement. Where's the data? Because again, there's no clinical evidence for that. And when was the last time you went to your counsellor or you went to your doctor or you went to your plumber and you said, whoa, guys, just before we get started, where did you do your training? Are you registered? Do you have this qualification? Do you have that qualification? You know, I mean, in all the years you've been working, how many clients have said to you, yeah, cough them up, where are your qualifications? It rarely happens. So why are we saying, and of course there's no clinical evidence that qualification has any impact on client safety, on better outcomes, on things like that? None. So why is this getting embedded into the regulations? Again, no clinical evidence for it, no sound basis for it, but there it is, and you're being asked to agree with it or not. Like, I mean, yeah. it's a problem. And even with regulation, it doesn't stop bad actors. All you have to do is go onto the APRA website there, and they've got the complaints register, and you can go and you can see, complaints that people have had or made about their health professional, and you can see the date, the details, all of this kind of stuff. There isn't a single profession where nobody ever had a complaint made against them. So again, it's like not making any sense. The regulation isn't going to stop people who want to make a complaint, making a complaint. They'll just continue to do it the way they have been, which is, to that person's peak body, like PAC4ACA, for example, or, whoever they're with, APS, AAPI, AASW, like all the things. So regulation doesn't stop people from, getting complaints made about them. And all you have to do as well is you can, I don't know if they're on the APRA website or because this was from my days in psychology, but there's a website somewhere and it shows like what was found to be like a, in air quotes, verified, legitimate type complaint. That's not the actual word, I can't remember it, versus vexatious, malicious, right? And it shows that overwhelmingly a lot of the complaints that are made against health professionals are without base and that have come about for other reasons, right? Like, one that happens a bit in psychology is where a parent brings a child along for some counselling and, some point there's family court and then the other parent, and obviously a parent is going to not lose, but I guess not get a favourable outcome. And so that parent often makes a complaint about the psychologist in this case, and it's because, they didn't feel heard or they felt like there was, bias or whatever it is, or they're hurt, they're angry, they want to, it's that anxiety, it's the fight or flight. And so they're like, I'm going to take down the person that they see as being responsible for them not being able to have their child more or have more visitation or have the child in their care or whatever it might be, right? So anywho, I thought that was important. The other thing that's in the regulations that you're being asked to vote on is they're saying that in order for the public to be safe, regulations are required because at the moment you might be able to work in Victoria, for example, and then maybe you, get kicked off a thing. We don't even have a thing to get kicked off, but hypothetically. And then you might just go and set up shop in New South Wales or some other state or territory. And so they think that by having regulations, it's going to stop bad actors from doing stuff like that. But it's actually not, because they will just change title. They will just call themselves something else and they will still continue to go and do the thing. So again, doesn't provide any, not credibility, but there's no real rationale here. Again, it's a baseless thing. It doesn't make any sense to have it included in what we're being asked to vote on here. Okay, the other thing too is it says in this paper that they looked to international models to be inspired for what ours should look like. They looked at what you would call top tier countries. That's phrasing that's used a lot in marketing. Like if you've ever run a Facebook ad and taken a Facebook ads course, you learn about top tier countries or tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 countries. But basically a tier 1 country is a country that's usually Western, usually English speaking, and has either Great British Pound, Australian dollar, US dollar, Canadian dollar, and now New Zealand, right? So they looked at UK, they looked at what else? Ireland and stuff like this. But again, if you just read this paper and you're like, oh, okay, they're looking over at all these other models, sure thing, but you didn't take the time to go and have a look at what those models are, what they include and don't include, and how they're working for counsellors and psychotherapists, like, you're missing out on some pretty interesting information here. Because Philip was saying yesterday, in Ireland, they rolled out a process and everybody thought it was going to be great, but now there's all this backlash from the counsellors and the psychotherapists because it's significantly impacted the way that they work, and they want it gone now. They want it like abolished now. But it doesn't say that in the paper. The paper just says, oh, yes, we've done our research and it was based on this model and that model. It doesn't tell you that the model isn't working. Also, in the UK, like what are they called? BACP, you can work as a counsellor over there without being registered. Totally fine. So, again, you're being told, yeah, we looked at these models, but you're not being told that the models either support what's already in place or aren't working. Okay. Philip went on to say that the Malaysian system would actually work potentially well here because although they're different in terms of how you get registered and everything, the model actually works quite well. And it might be a good sort of starting point, jumping off point for us here. So, but again, there's no mention of that. So, yeah. Some people were wondering, maybe the train's left the station, but Philip was quick to say the train hasn't left the station. The train can always be turned around. We've got options here. And actually, if you do have a diploma, it would be very, recommended, very much a good idea for you to go and have your say, especially if you didn't get to have your say with the national standards. Have your say now, go and put in responses now. And there is a Word document that the association has put together that you may find really, really useful to have beside you as you work through the questions, so that you've got information beside you so that you know what is being asked and you can make an informed decision about how you want to respond and what you want to say. And I will include the link to that below in the notes for you. Okay, what else? Just that the survey that we're being asked to do now has been based on the national standards and being opened up to the public for participation when how can they even know what we're doing over here? They don't represent our community. It's estimated that more than half of counsellors in Australia hold a diploma. So, yeah. What else did I want to say? I think that's about it. So I'm just going to jump over quickly before I wrap up and walk you through the document that the association put together because it may be helpful for you. But they recommend including a sentence that states your position. And they've given you a suggested sentence that you can work with that says, I support a strengthened self-regulation model that lifts safety and quality without reducing access to care or excluding vocationally trained practitioners. Okay. If when you're completing the survey, you're asked which model do you prefer and why, The preferred one, if you have a diploma, is voluntary regulation. They also refer to it as strengthened self-regulation. The reason that you probably want to choose that one if you have a diploma is because it's proportionate compared to the others. It's more proportionate because it matches real world risk while also keeping access open. It's practical, which means it's faster to implement, and it's lower cost to us than statutory registration and licensing, right? The other reason is to protect the workforce. So it protects regional, rural counsellors and psychotherapists and low-cost pathways, which is very important because the data actually shows, I think it was PACFA's workforce study or ACA's, I think maybe it was ACA's, but 23% of counsellors who hold I can't remember if it's holding a diploma or not, but 23% of counsellors work in rural, regional or remote locations. That's a quarter of the workforce. Whereas psychologists and social workers, for the most part, tend to work on the East Coast or in the leafy suburbs or in the metro areas, right? So if we choose a different model of regulation, what's going to happen to all the workforce that's delivering services in underserviced areas with higher needs, right? The psychs aren't going to go out there. Social workers aren't going to go out there. And then you're going to be saying to the rural, regional and remote people potentially, hey, do you know what? Job's over, go and find something else to do with yourself. Like, how's that in the best interest of anybody? It's not. Okay. It's more quality forward. So associations can enforce standards through membership and membership tiers, through professional development, through supervision, through the codes of ethics, all those kinds of things. And it also provides clarity for the public because it can improve public directories so that clients can choose really confidently, right? Something else is use contract-based requirements in government-funded services to drive uptake while also maintaining a fair transition for people who might be working in private practice who, want to work under those contracts or not. The third point that the association has raised, and as I said, there will be a link. You can go and grab this and have it beside you while you answer. But yeah, if you're asked what outcomes are the most important for you, it's a good idea to think about ticking or arguing for clear complaints pathways for client safety, access and affordability, especially for rural, regional and remote areas, for workforce stability to avoid unintended shortages in the workforce, for clarity for consumers and for employers, and also arguing for a fair, staged, bridged, stepped transition for existing practitioners, right? So that they're not restricted to do work that they've already been doing, right? The next one there is if you're asked what does, air quotes, good self-regulation look like, it might be helpful to use some of these in your response. And you can copy and paste any of this stuff too, by the way. You could say a nationally consistent standards framework that's embedded in governance by associations, right? Like your peak bodies. You could say a public-facing directory or register that shows who does meet the standards. Maybe include clear categories for that, right? Minimum practice safeguards, like having perhaps a unified code of ethics, mandatory CPD, professional indemnity insurance, clear scope of practice and referral expectations, record keeping and informed consent, the usual things, right? If you're asked, What risks exist with self-regulation and how would you mitigate them? You might want to say something like, well, inconsistent uptake across the workforce. And so an answer to that might be, or a solution to that might be to incentivize through employers, insurers, EAPs, government commissioning, public registers, etc. Another risk might be viable association standards. So a possible solution to that might be to have baseline requirements, minimum reporting, minimum accreditation processes for courses and stuff. I mean, how many times have you been in a counsellor's Facebook group and heard the stories of counsellors who were told by their body, oh yes, go ahead and do that course. It's approved, it's recognised. They go ahead, they pay the money, they do the course, and then they're all excited, go and fill out their application form, get rejected, told, oh yeah, we don't accredit that course anymore. And if you still want to be with us, just go and do another one. I'm aware of a handful of instances, and I'm sure there are lots more considering there's 80,000 people. I'm aware of a handful of instances of people who are on to their third diploma. What the H? Anywho, want to avoid that, right? Minimum training requirements, minimum qualification, clear pathways to qualification. Another risk could be consumer confusion potentially, and maybe the solution to that is to have a clear directory approach in simple English, plain English, of what meeting a standard means. Okay. The next point is, if you're asked in the consultation for your views on contract-based regulation. So that's talking about funding, right? Like I gave you the example of maybe NDIS or work cover. I'm being hypothetical here, but I'm just giving you explanation. You could say support with conditions like it's useful for government funded services like contracted NGOs, funded programs, PHNs, but it should also be paired with transition support. So timeframes, bridging, recognition of existing competencies of practitioners, avoiding creating a two-tier system where only the funded settings can comply, right? And ensuring contract requirements don't unintentionally exclude people who've got a diploma who are already competent and also are doing CPD, bound by ethics, having supervision, etc., right? If you're asked about your views on statutory regulation, so that's, the government does it, aka the style of APRA. I'm not saying we would necessarily be nested under them. I'm just using that as an example. If you're asked that, just be super clear about risks and conditions. So you might want to, again, just say something along the lines of statutory licensing risks, higher cost, admin burden, and workforce loss, especially with rural, regional and remote, and low fee services, right? If this were the model, diploma and advanced diploma qualified people would not be able to work in the industry anymore, right? We don't want that. We need the people with the diplomas and the advanced diplomas. Risk of unintended exclusion of vocationally trained, experienced practitioners who currently deliver safe, high-quality care. If statutory elements are pursued at all, then they absolutely must include grandfathering and transitional recognition with very clear eligibility requirements and a sensible, reasonable, realistic time frame for existing practitioners to be able to meet those updated requirements in and around their existing caseloads, especially if they're in private practice and self-employed. Multiple pathways. So maybe portfolio for, RPLs, having supervised practice to date be recognised, bridging programs, those kinds of things. To include proportionate scope, so not over-regulating low-risk counselling, right? And to have a really strong focus on access, affordability, and workforce sustainability for practitioners. We're not talking about whether or not clients can pay you. When the association is suggesting that you make a note in your response on this paper that it's very important that there's a strong focus on access and affordability, that's for you, right? We don't want you having to cough up 50 grand to go and do like the latest diploma that will suddenly meet all the, minimum requirements, right? And they're going to put a high premium on it because there's no competition. And, let's not forget that there is somebody who currently sits on the executive board of the ACA who also is the director of one of the only education bodies that the ACA accredits. You see, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's not what you know, who you know, but the members are the ones that are paying the price, right? Or could potentially be paying the price, I should say, unless they have been already. Anyway, my opinion, my 5 cents, got no evidence, just me over here with my opinions. And there should be providing access, affordability, and workforce sustainability. If you're asked about supervision and what should change, your go-to points are going to be the following: that supervision requirements should be competency-based, not qualification-gated, i.e., we want to value experience of the supervisors and the women who've already been delivering supervision over new supervisors, like people who maybe just got their masters very recently, and then on the top of that, they've gone off and got their supervisor qualification. And now they're recognised, but the women over here who have a diploma and 20 years supervising across sectors with, different health professionals, with different, areas of specialisation, not going to look in, right? So experience over higher qualifications. Recognition that accredited vocational supervisors with demonstrated competence, experience, and relevant supervisor training are extremely capable when supervising other vocationally qualified counsellors. Why shouldn't they be? Provide clear guidance on the need for supervisor eligibility, right? Including things like training, years of experience, and qualification. Supervision total annual hours. So frequency of supervision, supervision attendance, documentation, what counts as supervision, and to what extent, individual, group, reflective practice, peer, all the things. And of course, inclusion of support of a transition period to build supervisor capacity nationally. If you're asked for your thoughts on protected titles, scope, and low-risk counselling, it is a good idea to avoid blanket definitions that unintentionally push people out of practice. Okay, that's what you would write. As I said, you're most welcome. This is a publicly available document on the VMHPAA website under the tab National Standards. It's called Position. Scroll down, you'll see it. You can copy and paste these. The next one is you could recommend defining scope by risk and complexity and not by a practitioner's education. Keep pathways open for low to moderate risk counselling with clear referrals and escalation boundaries, and ensure clients understand differences through plain English descriptors without using confusing titles, right? If you're asked about equity, regional access, and workforce impacts, include one of these 3 points, which is that any model must protect access for rural regional communities where counsellors are often the first and sometimes only mental health support. Because as I said before, psychologists and social workers, by and large, don't work in those communities, they don't have the same level of presence that the counselling community does. A quarter of the counselling community work in those areas. It's not the same in psychology. It's not a quarter of the psychology workforce are off in the country. No. That higher compliance cost will reduce affordability and increase wait times. Here we are talking about two things. I think this is speaking about affordability for clients, because if you go and do more training, you're going to have to pay for it, which means you're not going to be able to do your $100 sessions anymore, which means it's going to affect some of your clients. You're going to have to recoup that money or work longer hours, and that's not good either, because we don't need you burning out. We don't need you giving up your personal time. We don't need health issues for you, nothing like that, right? And of course, we want to make sure that clients understand the differences again, and that transition mustn't penalise mature age practitioners and community-based vocational pathways. And I think this is really important because although I'm 51, I still don't see myself as mature age, but I guess maybe I am. But I know that, again, you can check the ABS data. It's there in plain sight. You can all go and see it. 80% of the workforce plus are women 40 to 45 years old plus. Of course, they're going to be disadvantaged. We don't want that. So it's very important that you understand how to respond, okay? You get options throughout to write free text and stuff like that. And there's a copy and paste ready paragraph that the association have given you if you do have a vocational qualification that you're most welcome to use. And it says that I support a strengthened self-regulation model to implement the national standards, complemented by contract-based requirements in government-funded services. This approach is proportionate, practical, and protects access, affordability, and workforce sustainability. If statutory licensing is pursued, it must include robust grandfathering or transitional arrangements and multiple pathways that recognise demonstrated competence, that's all of your experience, right? Including for vocationally trained practitioners and supervisors. So, yeah. It's a lot to listen to on a Friday morning, isn't it? I know, you're probably getting ready for the weekend, but this is super duper important because you've only got until next Friday to submit your answers. So, yeah, I'm going to wrap it up now so you've got time to listen, and also so you've got time to go ahead, access the survey, have this document beside you if you want to, use it or not, and formulate your answers and get through it, because it says it should only take 15 or 20 minutes. But the feedback that we're hearing from people who have done it is it's taking anywhere from 90 minutes to 2.5 hours, because they were just so gobsmacked at, you'll see it for yourself. They're clearly steering towards one of the three options. You'll see it. It's like clear as a nose on your face. And so it gave them pause, and then instead of just being able to answer questions they anticipated being able to answer, they all then went off and started doing their own research so they could understand what they were actually answering. Hence, we got people spending hours and hours on it when they'd only anticipated minutes. So hopefully this Word document here from the association will just cut that time right down for you and take it back to minutes. Of course, I do recommend going and reading the paper. There were also webinars that were done recently this week by ACA and by PACFA. Maybe you attended them, maybe not. I understand that attendance was made public, like anybody could go. So I assume, I haven't checked yet. I was super busy yesterday, and this morning I've just kind of woken up, had coffee, fed the little fella over here, and then jumped on to do this for you because it was my priority. So I haven't seen, but I would imagine they'll probably have the replays up on their websites and or their Facebook business pages, both of those associations. I know ours will be up and available hopefully today, if not tomorrow. You can go and have a look at it there too if you're interested. But yeah, no personal story from me today because I don't want to water down the importance of this. But don't worry, I will do an episode when I'm next in the mood and I have the energy because big stuff's been happening and I can't wait to tell you more about it. All right, my lovelies, go and complete the survey. And yeah, if you have any questions at all about anything to do with the consultation paper, anything you get stuck with, please speak to your peak buddy or ask a question in my Facebook community. You know, we've got members from all peak bodies there. The community, if you're not in it, is called The Ultimate Private Practice and it's free and it's on Facebook. Okay, thanks so much for being part of my world. Bye for now. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Private Practice Podcast. So as you reflect on today's insights, imagine creating real success in your private practice without going down rabbit holes or exhausting yourself with business activities that don't move the needle. With Practice Momentum, you have push of a button help available on demand. It's like having an expert in your pocket ready to guide you whenever you need it. Visit brooklynstorm.com to discover how Practice Momentum can transform your approach to building a thriving practice. I'm Dr. Brooklyn Storm, and I'll see you next time as we continue exploring the mind, business, and spirit of private practice success.